Welcome to chess. It's just normal chess. You got all the pieces, but what is that? So this chess piece is Haunted Armor, which has this moveset, which has a move or attack, so it can move or attack just like a king, which is all 8 of the adjacent squares, but also has this passive of blocking one normal attack from the adjacent 8 squares, and then you lose the armor. You only lose the armor part of it, you do not lose the moves or attacks. Or this piece is so ridiculous. The most insane thing about it, especially if your game design, visualization power, and intuition is good, you'll notice this is a thing. So I'm playing against an AI using this chess army here, and with just this Haunted Armor alone, probably gonna leave those unnecessary pauses in, but even the classic chess army, with its long range too, is vulnerable to armor. Like, from this position, none of these pieces can even hit the Haunted Armor from a non-adjacent square. Like, notice I didn't move the Haunted Armor here or here because knights are actually covering those, but this is already sick. Haunted Armor is capable of solo mate. Haunted Armor is notorious for being able to checkmate in lost-looking situations. There is not one piece that can attack the Haunted Armor from non-adjacent here. Armor in old Chess Battle Advanced has many incredible advantages, and solo mating is like the most recognizable of them. Another thing that's insane is like the pricing of it. The next champion without armor that can solo mate a king is this dragon with value 15. Haunted Armor is like half that, and dragon is more restrictive, like, needs to do that. And even then, a piece might actually be able to block it. Like, imagine the bishop was in the way, oh, then you don't have a solo mate. In fact, it's almost ridiculous that if the king is out in the open, Haunted Armor has the same moveset as a king, so therefore it can always chase it down. Of course, you do have to watch out for the longer range things and the unblockable attacks, but in this case, even if the king goes to the right side of the board, you could just avoid that bishop line and get mated. Like, the main point I'm trying to get across here is that they're not all situations where this works. So I had to change the position of the hole the king came out of. There's actually unblockable knight attacks here and here. But I mean, the Haunted Armor was able to solo mate from this position, and yet the dragon can't even do that. Just completely defended no matter what, so it's kind of sick that the difference between dragon and Haunted Armor's price is that big. However, this kind of leads us to our next topic, chasing. So this is a real match between two human players that involves lots of Haunted Armor on black side. There's also a piece that can teleport pieces closer to, like, immediately on the 4th row. But I'm showing you this replay not because of that, but because eventually a Haunted Armor gets teleported here. Haunted Armor is also one of the units that benefits extremely well from teleportation, since it's extremely threatening. It doesn't have a lot of mobility at base form. But the opponent does not respect the threat of the Haunted Armor at all. Which will become a huge mistake because that Haunted Armor moves here, and again, its only attacker is this thing, which is an adjacent piece, which is in the armor range, so it just hits the armor off. And that would not be a good idea because this piece is hanging undefended. The opponent moves that Crusader away, but this square is not defended well either. Like, remember how good it was at chasing the king, which means that it can chase around other units just as well. And so that means that Haunted Armor is really strong against this expensive units with low movement. Like, this is an expensive unit. It actually really deserves it being expensive. It has a really powerful ability, but its movement is complete trash, and that is a target for it to be chased. There are some cases where it even can chase around a dragon. Like, it's happened sometimes when the dragon, like, accidentally moves to a place where it would be trapped. Actually, like, I'll move this around just to, like, show the example of if the dragon was trapped. If the opponent messed up, they could actually lose this dragon despite the massive unblockable range. The mobility of the dragon, that is. Like, let's say it moves, like, here. This is a defended square. I'm not assuming the best moves here. I'm just, like, creating a situation where the dragon is trapped because of their other pieces. And I figure it'd be easier to show it by simulating it in this replay. Yeah, the dragon would have nowhere to go in here. Anyway, let's show how the actual game went, because it's kind of ridiculous. Like, the ranger tries to move out of the way, like, we get to this situation, and now the Haunted Armor is threatening to kill this 12 value piece, which is an even better uptrade than the Crusader that was being vulnerable at the start, and opponent still doesn't hit off the armor, and gets punished. Okay, that was also ridiculous. Why'd the opponent do that instead of freezing when there was a freeze ability right here? I mean, now the king is solo mated, so you know, in these videos, you're supposed to reveal the last one at the end, but I feel like emotion. This feels like the best example for some reason to bring it up. Probably a better move in this situation is actually to move this Crusader here, because it defends the Haunted Armor moving there because the Crusader hits it, and sets up the Ranger killing this Haunted Armor. You might have a situation where like the Queen takes and then the Ranger destroys it, but like the opponent is constantly fearful of the Haunted Armor. Even now, where it's threatening this value 13 trade, taking that is a bad idea, and yet the opponent managed to make it even worse by trying to avoid these higher value trades and getting something worse instead. Here's another random game. The starting moves don't matter very much, but at this point, there's a Fire Elemental, which is kind of like the Ranger in that it is a destroy target, which makes up most of the reason why it's a high-costed piece. But with the Haunted Armor nearby, how this Fire Elemental is actually trapped, you get this very ridiculous situation where Haunted Armor easily manages to trade with that Fire Elemental. Here's a real game between two human players that actually does involve that dragon. I don't actually know what the heck White's army is here, but you can see that Black has 2 Haunted Armors, and those will become really relevant. It's funny that a Fencer goes in and takes a Ranger too. I haven't shown that yet, this is kind of bad sequencing, but Haunted Armor is not the only armor unit in the game, and this armor unit was able to get an uptrade, so I guess that helps the example. But then this dragon comes in, value 21. Yeah, what happens here is that with these 2 Haunted Armors, that dragon is going to get zoned to death. So there it is. Of course, you can't take it because that's not unblockable hitting there. It moves there, which is like, that is so dangerous. And a Rook comes in to help prevent that dragon from moving. This is the only safe spot for the dragon now, and it's soon to be unsafe. An Angel actually does the final blow, since moving the armor would actually move it away from some of these control squares. But of course, that armor poking the dragon was how this even happened. So yeah. Alright, the next insane advantage with armor is variable trade opportunities. So by that, I'm going to use a game that doesn't involve armor for this example because it's globally relevant through all of chess, and of course it's relevant in old chess battle advance as well. So you don't need to know anything about this position other than the 6 value piece is attacking this 5 value piece. Now it is undefended, but because that's not an uptrade, you can just defend it. So this adds this defender to the Fire Mage. And because this is higher value, there's not an incentive to take this. But later in the game, we'll have a move where this Mage Tower, which is value 9, goes in here and attacks this value 28, which is obviously a much better piece than that Mage Tower. And so that higher value piece must move out of the way to prevent that uptrade. Because this is kind of a weakness of expensive pieces that they cannot trade, obviously expensive pieces need either some more control or some other utility that justifies their expensiveness. They often do stuff from far away so they can't be attacked. And then there's some pieces which are kind of in the 14 cost range, and especially the melee ones, like this Bishop and this Berserker, or, you know, this Legionary. There's like a lot of pieces in this zone where almost all the pieces in the game are going to cost less than it, so stuff around the 14 cost range are kind of an awkward spot where they can't trade well, but they only have medium ability to do stuff from far away and control stuff defensively. So how does this relate to the variable trades? Well, the armor is its own separate thing that can be traded off, which means that even if a Haunted Armor has a bunch of like 3 cost or like 1 cost, 2 cost minions in front, sometimes you can trade the armor for a minion. Now, honestly, this deal is so good for the Haunted Armor player that you don't see it that often in real games, which is why I have to simulate it here. But let's say White moves this Samurai here, which is threatening this auto attack on the armor. And by the way, small side note, this will hit the armor. It will not pierce through the armor. It'll just get rid of it if the auto attack goes through. But this is not to show off the auto attack. This is to show that the Haunted Armor can go take this, and then what? The Samurai can only bonk the armor off, and then the Haunted Armor could just go back. This does raise the question. In that example, Samurai, which was a value 3 piece, traded for the armor. So, is the armor worth 3? Well, for one thing, like, a pawn, for example, is a value 0 piece, but it's not literally worth nothing, as units have an extra inherent material worth. But the second thing that really makes armor suspiciously strong feeling in, like, every way is that you don't lose any morale or value for losing the armor. I also found this replay. We have a different armor unit here, Fencer. I will not be talking about specific armor units at this point in the video. Although it's kind of funny that we do see a variable trade where this 3 cost piece gets traded for the Haunted Armor's armor, like intentionally by Black too. I mean, Black didn't need to do that. And though I think a funnier move is what happens with this summoner. This piece can teleport other pieces. Blah blah happens. The funny moment happens actually here. So the Ranger was there and got teleported down here. And of course, if this were any other 8-cost piece, the Ranger could just take this. But because it's armored, it actually traps the Ranger in this spot. So this is like very funny, like unexpected defense. Anyway, back on the topic of variable trades with armor. And this is even better with more expensive pieces too. Like, this is a value 21 armor piece that gains a lot of attack, but is also, of course, more expensive to make up for it. In this game, we also have the regular haunted armor here. So just watch. Here, here, here. Okay, so the opponent's doing some auto attack with Samurai. The pawn takes. Oh, and by the way, the second word in this is actually defense. Yeah, a piece called armor, but the defense isn't even the most important part of it. And it doesn't come up that often because normally enemy pieces don't move into the haunted armor's range unless it's supported. But here, of course, if this were any other like 8-cost piece, the Samurai would just take it. But because it is armor, it only bonks the armor if that were to even happen, so it just doesn't this time. And so haunted armor can save you defensively. It's like inbuilt blunder protection. Anyway, this happens, and you can see, at the end of all this, the white has traded 2 pawns for 2 samurai and this armor, which is, way better than losing an actual full 8-cost piece. Okay, this is not the time to explain this aspect, but white's actually getting good compensation for losing that 8-cost piece, because this phalanx, you cannot move, it's displacement immune, which I've for some reason cut off, but that means that it would take a lot more moves to move the phalanx up. Because the opponent has a piece there, the phalanx can take, only if not immediately, as poisoning a kingside piece was deemed more important. Here, white actually want to do this down trade of this alchemist for these 2 pieces just to get the phalanx up, which actually happens in the game. So white's doing this because the Black King is very weak, especially because the alchemist helped destroy one of the minions in front. Here, there is not an armor trade because there's an unblockable attack the dragon is doing here, so the phalanx has to move away. But now, this is a 15 value. This is another overvalued morale piece, so it's not actually fully worth the 15 in material, but there is no piece that can actually capture the phalanx. After it makes this trade, it can only bonk the armor off. So again, like, the trade is so good for white, you usually do not see it in games. But now we have the phalanx with bonus morale sitting here. And this is actually the final line, morale storage. Alright, for the next thing here, we need to talk about units that can push other things, or teleport them. So we have this summoner, which has the ability to target units, like it can teleport them away, and it can pull ally units into this target square that is 3 ahead of it. But the obvious problem is that most of the time, if you're going to teleport or move something that's way in front, that's also a square that's much more likely for your opponent to have something that can just capture it. So this advantage is about how armor effectively cheats those conditions of wind, enchanting, and just moving the armor. In this match, actually I have to start from the beginning because I made some pseudo moves at the left. The armor is getting correctly zoned out. There's minions in front of it, and there's even destroy to keep that armor away. But later on in this match, the summoner does some nonsense, doesn't matter. Okay, here, because of how armor interacts and how it can be very dangerous if teleported, we don't pay attention to every turn. You can have mistakes happen like this, where summoner was able to get off this teleport and there's no piece that can take haunted armor directly, so we get this, and armor takes that, and it's just a huge disaster. For black, that the haunted armor was able to trade for a value 13 piece there. In that same game where I got that, 3-for-1 with the samurai, we actually have this moment. I'm playing with wind mages here. We have 2 wind mages, so these have the ability to push unit up to 3 spaces away. And just look at this. I move this very intentionally to place there, and opponent moves the samurai away in order to try to hit this haunted armor with the queen. But because there's wind, so yeah, anyway. Now, I covered the enchanted armor interaction in the unfair checkmate traps video. I covered that in way more detail, and there's funny clips in there. But basically, enchant makes an unit that you have immune to melee death for 2 turns. This is not a lot of time, and your opponent can actually physically block a lot of the threats, but if your opponent sucks, they might allow units getting trapped with the enchanting and wind combo. But what's making armor relevant here is that it kind of cheats the restrictions of enchantment, because let's say the similar moves happen. Not only are these pieces being threatened, but the natural immunity of haunted armor is almost like it's getting an extra turn of immunity. So in this situation, for example, the armor is actually picking up 1 extra minion, and then the champion it's trapping. One cursed thing about this, by the way, is it says making the ally immune to melee death, not melee hits. This was a wording change on purpose. It used to say immune to melee attacks or something. It literally used to say melee attacks. And you'd think there'd be some distinction there, but it really doesn't. Like, you can't hit off the armor. But thanks for that misleading change, Spaghetti Monster. You know, another sense in which this gets cheated is that if a knight were to try to do this, their condition of the enchant not being able to target the enemy king, it's just like irrelevant for armor because the armor is already not needed to be enchanted to hit the enemy king at all. Like, for example, I don't know, you make some nonsense moves just for demonstration, obviously, and here we have a teleport. Of course, by this turn, the enchant's already gone, and yet the armor has solo mating capabilities anyway. Don't comment about how the king could go all the way to the bottom of the board. Okay, the fourth one on the list, I kind of doubt that anyone will predict the topic of this one, even though as soon as I reveal it, it'll become obvious how this helps. Accelerating turn timers. There are a lot of units in the game that involve around something happening after X turns. For example, poison an enemy unit, destroying them in 3 turns. Or petrify enemy unit for 5 turns. There are many use cases trying to accelerate turn timers, making counter threats against poison, making threats so that your pieces can hopefully get unstunned, and some other location effects as well. And one thing to notice is during a normal trade, pretend that the opponent had some poison piece that wanted to attack or something, it doesn't matter that much. You make a threat or trade, could force your opponent to respond to that. So, like, if I did this move, I'd be starting a trade, and my opponent would really want to take that piece back, which means that they wouldn't have time to, like, re-stun of your pieces that has a stun timer on it, or do something with a piece that they're poisoned. But Haunted Armor requires 2 turns to respond to. One to get rid of the armor, and the other to take the piece back. So all trades that involve armor actually take 2 turns to resolve, instead of 1, which is an advantage. That is super key. There's a really fine line between whether a stun army can capitalize on a stun piece or are too pressured to do so. This replay between Jeff P and Doku actually shows it going wrong for the armor side. I feel like it's pretty instructive. This is about mostly a freeze army, where it freezes the enemy unit for 3 turns, so you can't use it. And something important with stun armies, I guess I haven't done a stun army video yet, is they operate on a very fine edge. So let's just watch how this goes. There's a lust piece that pulls other pieces automatically, and part of the meme of this army is pulling units into the freeze range. In this case, Black did this intentionally. Black is not using the armor the correct way in accelerating turn timers with stun involved. Instead, the armor pieces are the ones that are getting frozen, which is not actually how this should go. Yeah, you can see that since this is frozen, it's like a commitment. White needs to be basically taking this piece or doing something because this becomes a threat again when it's unfrozen. In this case, Black is like giving up pieces in order to try to reduce this turn timer, because one of the ways you could deflect a freeze timer is just by making threats, even if they involve giving pieces away. But here, it can just be refrozen too. So here, Black does not have enough threats to accelerate the freeze turn timer so that this becomes active again. And so Black's trying to make a threat while this goes, and of course, White goes and freezes that again. One of the ways you can deal with a stun army is trying to overwhelm it by having too many pieces to freeze. Like, if these 2 pieces are frozen, it actually costs 2 out of 3 of each of White's turns to go freeze that piece and then freeze that piece. Because the freezing only lasts for 3 turns, so there's a threat made with there, which gives the opportunity for Black to move this. But the thing is, though, this is still not actually what I mean by accelerating turn timers, in that the armor is not... in the early turns, it was not being used well. Actually, this might be a case where it is, but instead, this trade happens instead, where freeze isn't even involved, so it didn't even accelerate any turn timers at all at the time. And you can see that Black is overall morale down. If Black had already brought more armor to the left side and used that in order to distract instead of just throwing freaking pawns, this would have gone better. Here's a trashy game involving lots of skeletons spawning, and a piece called Earth Elemental. This piece, what's relevant here is the Petrify enemy for 4 turns, which is a stunning ability. And of course, the Haunted Armor being involved. Now, again, armor versus stun is not always clear whether it's the armor or the stun that's winning it. In this case, Black is actually getting really pressured here. Its Temperance is threatening to trade, and it's not really good that it does, so it gets petrified, but that leaves the opportunity to make lots of petrify-based threats. Rather, threats that not only threatening in their own right, but accelerate the petrify timer. So this Haunted Armor comes, gets stunned, but there's a king check to accelerate the timer. The Black is going to have to re-petrify this if it doesn't want to be captured. cap, which doesn't even help anyway, because the armor is such a threat at this point, but it takes a turn of bonk. It's already not enough. Like, if black had another turn, a pillar could be placed in the spot to prevent the king attack and how this can see into this square. But as it is, the king gets checkmated, in part because it had to take more than one turn to deal with the haunted armor. I'm not sure how relevant it is to compile, but might as well. There's location effects that happen after some turns. Thunder Mage, after 4 turns, any unit in the marked location is destroyed. Butterfly, after 20 turns. This is actually most relevant to do when they're already near their turn timers ending, since the turns just before when the effect happens are very important. Fire Elemental, that decays 1 value per turn. And Patience, which cannot attack enemy units before turn 25, which actually goes higher as the upgrades go up. Alright, and the last one is Psychological Damage. Because armor is so good at doing uptrades, this is the Haunted Armor Plus with extra movement, and it's attacking this 28 value Queen++. The rewards for the Haunted Armor player are really high, making threats is easy, it's harder to blunder armor, and like all of that combined, here we have this Haunted Armor forking the Queen++ and a checkmate threat. Here we have Fencer, which is another armor unit causing a major attack, both on this Queen++ and this Ranger. And like, why wouldn't it be frustrating? The armor player has to put in much less effort to get much more fat payout. We also have this amazing 4 IQ match. First, some 10 value champion gets up-traded for, and then we have this armor unit, this Fencer, which can attack in only 4 spaces, but it also has armor in those 4 spaces. Though this means it does not have diagonal armor. It has incredible amounts of movement, so watch this. There's a fork coming up here. I also did this at this moment because of the queen. It's also doing a double attack on the newly opened line here. So the alchemist goes there, but there's actually a better move than taking that samurai. Check. There is no piece capable of attacking this from the diagonals. Just useless axial attacks. So the only move that saves the king from checkmate is this swap. There's a swapper here. But that doesn't help. I mean, yeah, it saves the king, but this is a huge uptrade. But oh wait, from that position also, the Fencer can't die. There's no diagonals, it's only this Ranger, so... Oh, also, from this position, the Fencer still can't die. It's only getting attacked by poison. This Lilith isn't a real attack, it's charming an enemy minion. This thing can't reach, this thing can't reach. So it takes that for free, and takes that for free. This just happens with armor, like, all the time. Psychological damage. Chess battle advanced. Now, it's important to note that not all expensive units, or even all units, are vulnerable to haunted armor in the same way. For example, the destroy effect that we've seen before does not count as a normal attack. So, if you use the fireball in it, it just dies. And so we also have like pieces like the Pyromancer with the destroy effect. That is something that the armor can just have no effect with. We also have stunning effects like this freeze for 3 turns. We saw a Penguin with that ability in the last replay, and honestly, it's not that one-sided. All it is it's basically dependent on the situation whether the stunning is better for the armor side or for the stunning side. And there's also abilities like Petrify that would give the opponent opportunities to move a piece in, hit the armor off, and then take it. Then of course there are pieces like the Knight that do not have adjacent attacks to begin with, so Knight does not interact with the haunted armor at all, in terms of its armor mechanic, of course. There's also one very important balancing factor when it comes to armor, and that is units like Wizard Plus, which have an unblockable ability in their 8 adjacent squares. Due to what is basically stupid wordplay, like unblockable usually just means that it can hop over other things. This is also an ability that pierces armor, so when people say anti-armor, they're actually likely to be referring to this because it's such a kind of arbitrary design choice, and it's the one that's most like a normal attack, instead of being like, you know, a destroy ability. Now, it isn't all that common to have these unblockables, and in fact, there's no unblockable adjacent for green tiles, only yellow tiles, which come with swap. So there's some army building consideration there too. For this type of anti-armor also comes with swap, and since it comes with swap, these pieces will have cost where the fact that the unit has swap is making it more expensive, you know, because game balance. Unblockable swap that is in the 8 adjacent squares is actually not all that common. Like, if I go in my armies, like, I don't even have them. Like, No Mage has it. It has it on the adjacent, but it is not very common. And it's not usually because an army that has a specific game plan, those units will just tend to have more normal abilities. Like, this complicated wall of text doesn't have room to add a freaking swap ability on there, too. Although one last meme, frogs are unblockable and therefore can pierce armor. So I'm gonna go quickly over some of these units that have the potential to nuance armor. Like, no one is really using Toad because you need to build the army around this effect. Note that the deep attack chain can be blocked. Like, yes, the Toad pierces armor, but if the space that it would land on, because it lands one space after it's blocked, it can't attack it. It can't even knock the armor off. Not that that would make sense. So the Toads aren't really gonna help deal with the armor, and you should poke the spaghetti monster for them to get buffed. So there's stuff like Dryad that can turn enemies into ally sapling, and of course this also goes through armor effects. But it's more useful for stuff that has only orthogonal armor and no attacks, because otherwise the Haunted armor can just go on the diagonal. The same is true for other units, although, like the Fire Mage, for instance, this unit also has Destroy on the orthogonals, but only regular attack. The diagonals, it's not something you would use primarily for that armor destroying ability, but it can help sometimes. There's also some overcosted stuff, at least for the purposes of destroying armor. This thing is the same cost as Haunted armor, so it's not getting any benefits. Like, it's not uptrading for armor. And the same goes for Gas, which is a similar ability, but a different teleport condition. Null Mage, that also has unblockable piercing armor, but again, only orthogonal, so it doesn't help that much. And Lust is actually a very important exception. Lust is actively vulnerable to armor because it can automatically pull a target unit in the direction of Lust, and that means that it's even easier for Haunted armor to go in. I guess I didn't mention that in any other part, but it's such an important nuance that I have to basically mention it. Pyromancer, this is Magic Destroy, and is probably a little underrated even though it has noob unit vibes. It is kind of hard to maneuver, like you can't make it only go back one row or up one row. It's kind of hard to maneuver in that way. Okay, enough of those bad units. Let's talk about the units that actually deal with armor a little more. Templar is not very good nor very liked, but it can help defensively. It has piercing yellow attacks on the direct horizontals. It even does it far away too, but it's not very fun to play. It's like a purely defensive thing. I don't expect it that often. I would actually assume that the best other unit, this has the piercing attack all around it, which is perfect, and it has better mobility than Haunted armor. It costs a little less than Haunted armor, so this is actually a worthwhile Haunted armor anti-armor piece. Wind Mage has seen better days, like Wind Mage, and like there really aren't armies playing this, but it does have the all piercing at this tier. Thunder Mage is actually even more used. Like, that is actually a unit that is used in meta armies, and it can have armor piercing, so that's nice. It isn't like Banshee or Gas, which have the piercing but no special purpose in an army. Paladin is also quite expensive for what it's doing, and it doesn't even have yellow on piercing on these forward attack squares, but it can swap away a king, so it's passable. Not that great. Now, when it comes to anti-armor, this Wizard Plus is what most comes to mind. It's also very slippery. Like, it's because it has that swap, even though its mobility is bad, it's hard to force a trade with it. Because of, like, if you have armor in your army, sometimes you play sniping units that try to get rid of anti-armor like this. But because anti-armor piercing is so intertwined with swap, it's actually hard to make that work. Also, Chastity, no one plays this expensive tier, but you can try. It also has the swap, but is purely defensive is what it's doing. There's also Void Mage, which also is incredible anti-armor. It both has the diagonals that are piercing, but this ability that converts target enemy moveset into move or teleport basically ignores everything that armor is doing because that's not a normal attack. The only thing is this unit is kind of unfashionably expensive after some nerfs, but it is really good anti-armor. Stone Mage is a joke. Soulkeeper is not a joke. This thing has transform enemy into ally ghost and is very good area denial and area control. Yeah, it pierces armor. Phoenix is and maybe Phoenix but this is actually used in an army that uses the Nexus to try to portal the eggs out. This unit, like the design of this unit is basically that it revives on death. It first transforms into an egg, and the upgraded tiers of Phoenix give it a piercing yellow swap. I guess, yeah, now that I look at it, Medusa is also relevant because there's the Petrify, and sometimes the Petrify is better than the arm. It's better than the normal attack at getting rid of the armor. I guess some other minions that might be relevant to point out is Fireball. We did actually see that already, but it has range destroy instead of any melee, so that could be really good sometimes. Gnome, which is a Petrify effect, and even a benefit to using the Petrify, so that interacts against armor well. And Frostbuffet, an enemy unit that targets Frostbuffet with any attacker ability is frozen for one turn, which can be the one turn that's really relevant in delaying the armor attack from being devastating. So instead of the armor piece being devastating, in that if there was not that frozen effect, this would be threatening the king right now, but because it's frozen, you can just knock it off and then take it for real next turn. Hey, did you know when you type ass into the search bar, you get all of your armor pieces? Oh. Also, it's amazing how there's exactly enough units to fit. Like, you can see the scroll bar doesn't scroll, I think it's a perfectly rectangular ass. Anyway, the entire general section of the video is already basically discussing Haunted Armor because it's the most versatile, it's the least susceptible to matchup luck, and the only thing is that there may be armor and anti-armor on both sides of a meta army just because it's so ubiquitous. The higher upgrade tiers, even though it looks like it's costing 3 to get a bunch of moves, the synergy with movement is so strong with armor. It's just that it has some tradability issues. It can no longer uptrade with like 11-ish cost pieces, but it's still immensely strong. But also, because it's higher cost, it's also more susceptible to anti-armor. The rest of the tiers are just kind of overcosted, and yeah, it's kind of funny because like older versions, this is the very oldest version of Haunted Armor. The cost looks insane at this point, but if I go through the versions, the cost increases a little bit, and then it turns to this version in version 47. This, I don't know. Some people have liked it. It's a bit of a troll because the developer went from this 14 cost version, which I liked playing. I thought this was fair, even though it kind of didn't leave much room for plus, into this teleport version that some armies actually used as a different sort of checkmater, solo mater, because like it can do things that the dragon cannot, and then it was changed to 16 cost, and then it was changed, of course, back to the current release version, but it costs 15, so I'm very dissatisfying that it's 15 instead of 14 now. So next up is the Crusader, which has only axial block. It also comes with just range 3 attacks in general. The upgrade gives it more attack move range and some extra moves, but +4 cost. The next upgrade after that, it's +4 cost again, but it gains diagonal attacks compared to the previous tier. And then the last tier, it gains more move and attack range again, and range 2 armor. Which is kind of thematically weird how that works. Like, what, if it's range 7 armor, would it hit the armor and then go back in terms of flavor and lore? But anyway, you can kind of see how range 2 armor would be more niche though, because range 1 attacks are more common than range 2. Fun fact, apparently the Crusader shield used to be single use. Crusader actually came in the game before Haunted Armor, and it's just insane that it even was infinite at some point. God damn it, I got another Skinner box. Playing with units with range, but only axial block, I kind of play a little differently. Here the queens are safe, since if you put it there would always be a queen that can take it on the diagonal. Like, even if the rook was here, this queen would then be able to take on the diagonal, so that's a safe position. But then you would have to be more worried about pins and skewers. If the units were just slightly moved, this would be a devastating attack because of the block. Hitting 2 queens, even if the first moved out of the way instead of hitting the Crusader, the other one would be vulnerable. So here's the tiers of Crusader. This is still a pretty normal armor piece, though I honestly haven't seen it much nowadays. Especially +++, that is definitely not the current meta, and it still has a high win rate, even though I've like never seen it. Like, it's like not that bad of a piece, but that's because some minions only attack diagonally like Frost Mephit. And so Crusader has no special abilities here, because these minions don't even have the ability to hit the armor off. And that's super dissatisfying. Haunted Armor has this problem much less because it covers all the adjacent squares, instead of getting nuanced by diagonals. This is what I mean when I say that it's more vulnerable to have a +++, as in to spend up your points into an armor unit that still has this diagonal problem. Because it's just going to be painful when you can't do anything because of diagonal coverage. And also, this Royal Guard +++ is the most painful to this axial attack because it has the diagonals and the armor piercing on the other 4 squares, which perfectly nuances a Crusader type unit. Despite that, the launch version of Crusader, which had weaker earlier tiers, like it's so much weaker, and the ++ only gained armor instead of range back then. But it was that tier in the middle that was really dumb, because this is just cost -2 from what it currently is, and god, this thing was meta as hell. It was very, very strong, and that was despite getting nuanced by diagonals. So it's very interesting that it's no longer really a part of the meta. The next unit is Fencer, which has range 1, but armored, and also a shocking amount of mobility. Fencer honestly has some very sus comparisons to other units at the same or similar cost, because this is cost 2, this is cost 3, and this is cost 4? Yeah, gain armor and like a ton of moves, sure. But then we have cost 7, which gains range 2 move and attack. And the sus comparison on this one is Crusader itself, which loses all those moves to gain an extra move or attack range. for +1 cost. It's another thing. It's very weird. Fencer also can cause some immense psychological damage due to people not tracking all its moves. Then we have Fencer plus giving it a bit more move and range 2 armor. And the last tier, I'm happy the spaghetti monster went for memes on this one. It's a teleport tier. So now it can do long range threats from a great distance. Now, could you believe the old Fencer looked like this? It looks so bad compared to what it is now. Cost 7 at that. Ugh. Anyway, it got changed like over and over with some cost reductions. I'm going through the update logs. Now, the max range Fencer. That still no one actually played. That, by the way, got nerfed. I don't know, maybe the spaghetti monster is anti-fun. But then it got these weird teleports that were even less popular, and finally to here. Interesting that, like, the costs were 5 and 8 back then, but then they were reduced, and this is what it is in the actual version of the game. But one version earlier, that tier was cost 12, and it was annoying people a lot. I do not think that it was competitively good, because of the diagonal problem, but it certainly did cause a lot of really stupid potential checkmates. Statistics definitely agree that ++ is the worst tier. There aren't that many sample sizes for Fencer +0, but I think that still kind of underrated. Fencer ++ is still a meme and can still do stupid checkmates and trades, so I'd expect some of its win rate is psychological nuance. The next unit to discuss is the Phalanx, which is the same adjacent attack, move, and block as the Haunted Armor, but with extra attacks on the sides. It also has a passive to destroy the attacker if it's coming from a knight attack. This doesn't make up that much of the unit's value, as some matchups never have this at all, but it is very annoying, especially if the opponent forgets or they have like an expensive unit, because quite a lot of expensive units in the game happen to have knight attacks. So yeah. So it can make situations like these, where it looks like that the armor unit is not being defended, is actually defended, because that would just kill the dragon, which does happen in this game. Now, I feel like it should be obvious by looking at it, but the lower tier Phalanx is paying way too much for too few squares, like 5 costs for these, and the next is not much better, but there's a huge improvement on this tier, because being able to threaten from a farther distance means that's less easy to be attacked, and it becomes more of a real unit if the armor is removed, but if you can still keep the unit. So it should not be surprising that the win rates continue increasing up the tiers, because the game's pay to win. One thing that is especially overpowered signaling is this displacement immune on the unit, which means that no piece other than itself can move it. Well, except for one exception. By the way, even though Phalanx says it's displacement immune, you can still castle with it. You know, as if vertical castling wasn't cursed enough. One thing is that Phalanx forces such big restrictions on defense, like, if you leave a unit, so that's like a 13 cost unit that can be taken. It can go for a 2-for-1 in many situations. It can also just leave and keep the overvalued Phalanx there, so it's really threatening. The only thing is that anti-armor can sometimes make it feel lackluster. The main obvious reason is displacement immune is because of the unit called the Portal. You can see that I cannot teleport it. Like, I couldn't even swap with it either. But if you cheated to imagine this was possible, you can see how devastating it would be to do a fork. Like, this is a checkmate fork, as well as a fork on being able to easily get the rook. So, like, let's say you defend the checkmate fork. You would just, like, take a minion, couldn't do anything about losing a rook. It would just be too easy to get 3-for-1s. Like, imagine portaling even more Phalanxes up there. It's already a sign that would be extremely overpowered. Because of this, it's almost like a massive bonus. Even though there's no text that gives an on-kill bonus, sometimes the opponent will let you attack, brings the Phalanx way up, and those can create massive range 3 forks too. Also, since we have Haunted Armor and Phalanx, which have the same armor range, this is a good time to talk about synergy. This also applies to a different unit called Behemoth, which has a different kind of immunity that cannot be targeted by enemy minions. But basically, look at how in this position, this Haunted Armor would love to go here. That's a big threat, because it's hitting the king and threatening to take some pieces for free. But we have this Paladin that is firing yellow attack that's going to be able to pierce the armor if it goes here. But we have actually 2 units on that square with the same armor range, so all that needs to happen... Okay, fine, I guess this square is now a checkmate threat, whatever, you greedy player. And you could also 3-for-1 by hitting this, But look, here's the example. At this position, there's only the Paladin that is armor piercing, so just take it. The Paladin takes it, the Phalanx takes it, and because they share the same armor range, there's no leaks in terms of being able to take another armor piece during the middle of the trade, so that's that. We also need to talk about an armored minion called Duelist, which has only one attack, but it's a forward attack with armor. Of course, then it can only block from that range. And it promotes to a different armored unit. The next upgrade makes it cost 1, but it gains these forward range 2 moves. And the promotion is also better. It promotes the Fencer Plus that we saw before. Duelist Plus Plus gains these side moves and some back moves, and then its Fencer promotion improves again. And then Duelist Plus Plus gains side attacks for 2, and it promotes to the Plus Plus tier of Fencer. So this, of course, interacts with the Fencer's moveset as well. Now, I feel like 2 of these tiers are clearly the best tiers. If you want to intuit which is pretty much the best tier, 2 of them are actually kind of competing for attention, but it's the plus tier and the plus plus tier. This plus used to have armor on the sides too, before it just became a stupid mini fencer. The gaining of the range 2 move makes it unique, especially because it promotes to an armored unit. There is no promoter in the game that has this amount of threat from range 2, which in other words is row 6, so it can hide out here, and now suddenly it has the black here needs to worry about this threat as if it were an actual Fencer Plus. And there's also some nuance in that the Spaghetti Monster hasn't coded the ability to let you see what the unit is, so people might forget what the Fencer Plus looks like. But like seriously, the only reason this is not happening right now is because of the diagonal attack from the Phalanx Plus. But as soon as that gets moved, boop. And that's just insane. Like, other units that are promoters need an undefended square, but armor becomes cheaty yet again. And Fencer can do so many annoying checks and perpetuals. The plus variation, due to it promoting to the Fencer with range 2 armor, can even mastermind some insane situations where stuff like Rook, which is like the most common defender of the backline promotion, can't even do anything about it. But, you know, Duelist's main flaw is that it's not very good for defense and control due to only having 1 attack square, which makes it vulnerable to certain types of magic that hits all adjacent squares like Lilith and Soulkeeper do. Those are units that can charm or turn enemy units into ghosts. Another thing to watch for is that Snake is one of those units with an unblockable attack minion, and that does pierce through the armor. Well, this is unlikely to happen very much. Somehow Snake is not all that popular. You also might wonder, because Samurai has an auto attack and that hits the block, if the Duelist is good against the Samurai. Well, it's very situation dependent, and usually Duelists cannot easily get a Samurai kill because the Samurai could just move out instead of getting vulnerable to this forward attack. However, it can sometimes rarely happen that a Duelist is capable of getting a Samurai this way, if the Samurai is nowhere good to go. This doesn't happen that often, but there was a recent replay where the Duelist actually managed to get a Samurai. So it's around here. So these pieces move, blah, blah. Here's the Samurai that gets moved here. Now, it looks okay because even though there are free kill pieces, none of them quite directly and efficiently take out the Samurai yet. Like, this would take a lot of maneuvering in order for this to magic destroy it, since, like, this square is blocked and there's weak defense here. But the move that happens here is the beacon that can teleport ally units, teleports this Duelist in a position. The auto attack happens, and the Samurai doesn't have anywhere to go. So the Duelist is actually able to take that Samurai there. Funnily enough, then Black does their own funny trick with the Samurai by summoning a unit and auto-attacking, but that's not really part of the armor video, is it? Another thing to note is that Duelist, even base Duelist, can be very annoying to an army that's using a unit called Hoplite. This is a unit that moves all adjacent Hoplites as well, but it only has forward attack. And of course, Duelist with armor on that forward attack is very frustrating to the Hoplites, because it's often going to be able to get 2-for-1s and break apart the Hoplite formation. Speaking of Hoplite, you might be wondering, Hoplite does indeed promote to an armored unit, which can result in some very silly situations because it can get cheese promoted. But in general, Hoplite is actually so complex that it needs an entire other video on it, and the armor promotion is not actually similar to other armor, because that armor is a strong payoff, but you don't get it consistently. There was this really stupid game where Hoplites kind of got nuanced, Black isn't actually doing very much, and so White can only lose this game by acting really dumb. However, the Hoplites kind of break through around here almost, but there's tons of sacrifices of Hoplites that don't make any sense. But the whole point is, of course, Hoplite promotes to an armored piece, and armored pieces are unfair with enchant. There's a piece called Dove. Now it promotes to Angel, which has an enchant effect. We're gonna need to wait until that turn. Okay, now, this Dove is about to promote. The threat is not respected. So even though this Hoplite looks like it's completely undefended, like queens are hitting it from every angle, this utter nonsense happens. It promotes to Angel, which is a piece that says on death, All ally minions become enchanted, making them immune to melee death for a turn. Of course, that angel is too overpowered and it's forking things to be alive, so it gets taken, which enchants that for 1 turn. 1.5 turns according to the spaghetti monster. But yeah, that's enough to make it immune here, and now you can't stop the promotion. So white loses based off this. Actually, black loses their king as well, but white ends up morale ahead, which is insane. Chess battle advanced. Damn, I really hope I said black makes it morale ahead. Hoplite being able to promote into an armored unit is actually kind of relevant in meme matchups that involve pieces that can move other pieces. So here with the summoner, which has the ability to move other pieces around, and more importantly, to teleport a hoplite up 3 squares. And so this is obviously unintuitive, because if that hoplite were, for example, like over here, we could get a teleport into an armored unit. That's obviously devastating. And of course, I'm showing it because it happens in this game. So you can see finally the Hoplite moves into position where it can be hit by the teleport ability of this. It does not get responded to, and this Queen++ very high value unit is gonna get trapped by this summoner teleporting that Hoplite. So, chess battle advanced. There was another one, by the way, even though it got stunned immediately, so it didn't even happen twice this game. Chess battle advanced. Man, it's kind of sad that I have footage of cheesing TI both in this video and the checkmate traps meme video. Like, eventually a 400 IQ video may be deserved. But so far, all it is just meme replays of washing Tide Pods. Whew, there's a lot to deal with in armor in this game. So that's all of the units. We have some other ones, like, yeah, that's passive, and this was... So I covered all the armor units. There's no... I don't know why Spaghetti Monster added armor to that unit. Why has the Spaghetti Monster done this? That unit isn't about the armor. In fact, that unit doesn't synergize with armor. Don't talk about Gluttony. Anyway, goodbye. Well, I guess there actually is one funny thing about Gluttony. So Gluttony steals the moveset of pieces, but it cannot attack allies. That's because in old Chess Battle Advanced, could do something easy like take a queen and then take armor. This has just been simulated, like, again, this does not work in the real game. And then all of a sudden, it would have solo mate potential from long range, which is clearly overpowered. Well, I don't really know what the Spaghetti Monster was thinking on that one, because even if you do take a pawn, the pawn's moveset also overwrites it, which means it loses the block from... Anyway, Spaghetti Monster is dumb, and doesn't like it when people have fun. This is why new Chess Battle Advanced will not have these sad restrictions. Although armor is a status effect instead of an ability. Look, you can still manage to get stupid things to happen, okay? New Chess Battle Advanced.
Chess Battle Advanced. Chess Battle Advanced. Chess Battle Advanced. Chess Battle Advanced. Chess Battle Advanced. Chess Battle Advanced. Chess Battle Advanced.